He wanted a quiet wife. She arrived with opinions and a book. He had written one simple request in his letter to the marriage agency: a quiet woman who keeps to herself. What stepped off the stagecoach in Sweetwater, Montana, that cold April morning was a woman in a dusk-gray traveling dress, holding a leather-bound book against her chest like a shield, and the very first words out of her mouth were, "Your town spells its own name wrong on the welcome sign. There's no second T in Sweetwater." Caleb Brant stood frozen beside his wagon, hat in his hands, rain starting to spit from a bruised sky. He had imagined many things about the woman who would answer his advertisement. He had imagined a soft voice, a bowed head, someone who would cook his meals and mend his shirts and leave him in peace with his grief. He had not imagined this. She looked him up and down, and then she looked at the mud, and then she looked back at him. "You're Mr. Brant," she said. It was not a question. "You're taller than your handwriting suggested." He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "I'm Eleanor Hayes," she went on. "And before we go any further, I should tell you plainly, I did not come here to be quiet. I came here to be useful. Those are not the same thing." What neither of them understood yet was that both had lied in their letters, and both lies would save them. Caleb Brant was 34 years old, built like a man who had spent his life lifting things that fought back. He had wide shoulders and rough hands, and a face that the sun had weathered into something hard and unreadable. His hair was dark, going gray early at the temples, and his eyes were the color of river stone. He owned the largest cattle ranch in the valley, 400 head, good water, fenced acreage that had taken him a decade to clear. By any measure, Caleb Brant was a success. He was also the loneliest man in 3 counties. 2 years before, he had buried his wife, Margaret, and the child she died trying to bring into the world. The baby had lived 4 hours. Caleb had dug both graves himself, in the frozen ground behind the house, because he could not bear to let another man's shovel touch them. After that, the silence in the house became the only thing he could stand. Voices reminded him of the ones he'd lost, so he stopped going to town socials. He stopped sitting in the front pew at church. He spoke to his ranch hands in short sentences and to no one else at all. When his foreman, an old Welshman named Gowan, told him a man could not run a house and a herd both, Caleb had written to the agency out of exhaustion, not hope. He wanted a wife the way a man wants a fence mended to stop the wind from getting in. What he feared, though he would never have said it aloud, was that he would love again, because loving again meant standing at another graveside someday, and he did not think his heart could dig a third hole. Eleanor Hayes was 29, and she had been told her whole life that this made her difficult. She was tall for a woman, with a straight back and dark hair she pinned without much vanity. Her face was handsome rather than pretty, with a sharp chin and gray eyes that missed nothing. She had been a schoolteacher in Ohio for 11 years, and she had been very good at it. She had also been let go from her position, quietly and without a reference, after she refused to stop teaching the older girls arithmetic beyond simple sums. The school board felt it gave them ideas. Eleanor felt that was the entire point. She had no family left. Her father, a printer, had taught her to read everything and question most of it before he died. Her mother she barely remembered. She had spent her savings on the train and stagecoach west, and the book she clutched to her chest was the only thing of her father's she had kept, a worn volume of essays, its spine cracked from 100 readings. She had answered Caleb's advertisement not because she wanted a husband, but because a woman alone in 1887 had few honest ways to keep a roof over her head, and marriage to a quiet rancher in a faraway place seemed safer than starving slowly in a city that had no use for her. She had written that she was agreeable and domestic. It was the first lie she had told in years, and it had nearly stuck in her throat. What she feared was not loneliness. She had made peace with loneliness long ago. What she feared was being made small, being asked, one more time, to fold herself down into something quiet and convenient and half alive. The ride to the ranch took an hour, and they spent most of it in a silence so thick it had texture. Caleb decided somewhere along that muddy road that he had made a terrible mistake. The woman beside him sat ramrod straight, reading her book even as the wagon jolted over ruts, and every so often she would say something like, "Your near horse is favoring its left foreleg. You ought to check the shoe." Or, "That fence line is leaning. The posts rotted at the base." She was right about both. That was what irritated him most. He thought, she's proud. She's the kind of woman who has to be right, and she'll wear me down to nothing. Eleanor, for her part, had already decided that Caleb Brant was a cold, hard man with no more warmth in him than the iron rim of the wagon wheel. He had not asked her a single question about herself. He had not smiled. When she'd mentioned the lame horse, he'd grunted like a bear disturbed in winter. She thought he wanted a servant who could read recipes. He'll be disappointed, and so will I. The house, when they reached it, was large and well-built and utterly without life. Clean, but in the way a thing is clean when no one truly lives in it. There were no curtains, no flowers, a fine layer of dust on every surface that wasn't touched daily. And on the mantel, a small daguerreotype of a woman with gentle eyes, turned slightly toward the wall, as if even the photograph could not bear to be looked at. Eleanor saw it. She said nothing, but she understood all at once what kind of grief lived in that house. The first true clash came on the third evening. Eleanor had spent 2 days cleaning, and she did it well, but she had also, without asking, moved his late wife's sewing basket from the front room to a shelf in the spare bedroom. She thought she was being kind. She thought the basket, sitting out where Caleb passed it 40 times a day, was a wound he kept reopening. When Caleb came in and saw the empty corner where the basket had been, something in his face went white and then very dark. "Where is it?" he said. "I only moved it, I thought." "You thought?" His voice was low and shaking. "You've been in my house 3 days. You don't think about what's mine. You don't touch what's hers." Eleanor felt her own temper rise to meet his, hot and reckless. "She's gone, Mr. Brant. The basket is not. You are killing yourself slowly by keeping a shrine instead of a home, and you brought a stranger into it expecting her to live among your ghosts and never disturb the dust." It was too much. She knew at the instant she said it. Caleb did not shout. He simply turned and walked out into the dark, and she heard the barn door close, and she stood alone in the silent house with her heart pounding and her eyes stinging, certain she had ruined the only chance she had left. That night she packed her bag. She decided she would leave on the next stage. But in the morning the sewing basket was back in the front room, and beside it Caleb had placed a chair turned toward the window, with good light, where a person might sit and read. He never mentioned it, neither did she. It was the first thing either of them had ever done for the other. After that something shifted, slowly, the way a frozen river breaks up in spring, not all at once, but with small cracks that widen day by day. Eleanor learned that Caleb rose before dawn and worked until full dark, and that the work was not cruelty or avoidance, but the only language his grief had left. She began leaving coffee on the porch rail for him in the cold mornings. He began drinking it. Caleb learned that the schoolteacher who could not keep quiet was also a woman who never complained, who hauled water and split kindling without being asked, who could set a broken fence faster than 2 of his hired men. When a calf was born tangled in breach in the May rains, it was Eleanor who knelt in the mud beside him, sleeves rolled to the shoulder, and helped turn it, talking low and steady to the frightened mother until the calf slid free and breathed. Afterward they sat in the barn, soaked and filthy and exhausted, and Caleb looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You've done that before," he said. "My father kept goats, and I read a book about it." She smiled, tired. "I read a book about most things." For the first time in 2 years, Caleb Brant laughed. It was a rough, rusty sound, like a door that hadn't opened in a long while. It surprised them both. The town was harder to win than Caleb. Sweetwater had decided, before Eleanor ever arrived, exactly what kind of woman would answer a mail-order advertisement. The women of the church circle watched her with cool eyes. They did not invite her to their sewing afternoons. They whispered that she was odd, that she read too much, that she had opinions a wife had no business having. Eleanor bore it with her chin up, but it cost her. Caleb saw the cost. He saw the way she sat very straight and very alone at the back of the church. What changed it was the children. The valley had no schoolteacher. Hadn't had one in 3 years. The children ran wild or worked their parents' land, and none of them could do more than scrawl their own names. Eleanor, who could not help herself, began with one, the Gowan boy, the foreman's grandson, who lingered near the ranch house with hungry eyes. She taught him his letters on the porch in the evenings. Then he brought his sister. Then a neighbor's children came. By June, 11 children sat on the Brant porch 3 afternoons a week, and Eleanor Hayes was teaching them sums beyond simple addition, and the parents who had whispered about her began, grudgingly, to nod when they passed. Caleb built benches for the porch without being asked. The turning point came on a warm night at the end of June, and it came because of the grave. Eleanor had walked out past the garden in the long summer dusk and found Caleb standing at the 2 markers behind the house, the large one and the small one. He did not hear her come. She saw his shoulders, those wide, strong shoulders, shaking, and she heard him speaking softly to the smaller grave, calling it by a name. Thomas. He had named the baby Thomas. She should have left him to his privacy. Instead, she came and stood beside him, close but